What's up, crew? Welcome to Filming in Progress, the show that takes you backstage into the world of local businesses and the people who make them shine. Today, we welcome Nathan, founder of Innovate Cochrane. Nathan is passionate about empowering entrepreneurs and unlocking human potential to drive meaningful change. Nathan, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Where are we?
We are in Cochrane, Alberta, and specifically we are in Found Books and Shop, which is a locally founded and owned bookstore. Julia and her team have this amazing space that has kind of morphed and evolved, COVID and beyond. But yeah, it's a fantastic local place to come. And if you're not big on busy coffee shops, she has fantastic coffee and coffee bar, and then it's quiet. And yeah, we do some of our Innovate Cochrane events here, which we'll get into. But yeah, it's just such a lovely kind of life-giving space. So that's when we were chatting about this, I thought this is the right place to do this. So yeah.
It seems like it's a perfect space for a building community and that sort of thing. We were chatting a little bit off camera. Why is community building so important?
I think from my background, professionally or corporately in, corporate innovation or transformation or continuous improvement, all of those kind of models and knowledge and things, what I've found over the years is to make any kind of meaningful change, it's the humans that are involved. And so whether that, and the other thing that I'd say maybe I got demystified over the years was whatever I'm doing in a corporate space in my day job, call it, all of those things relate to how humans connect and how they work together. And then I thought, well, but I live in this community. And so how do I bring that part of who I am to my community and help raise the collective quality of life here? And actually that was probably one of the key seeds to, well, how do we do that more formally? How do we have relationships, we do coffee in places like this, but how do we kind of bring more of a vessel to it so people can align to it? And so that's community innovation is just humans doing something together, and then what qualities do you try and cultivate or foster? It's literally, the shell looks different than maybe a large corporate where I spend my day job, but the bones of it are essentially exactly the same. So it's been great to test in both of those arenas.
100%.
Yeah.
Was that like, importance of connecting and that sort of thing, and community innovation, was that ingrained in you early on in your life, or was it something that you learned along the way?
That's a good question. It's usually me asking the questions, but that's a good one. I would say, I think so I grew up in kind of a church environment, and so you were always seeing the same people every week. So there was probably some subconscious, you need people, you can't just live by yourself. And then the notion of service, that's big in that kind of culture too, or subculture. So I think those elements were probably part of it. I think for me, maybe jump into a bit of my kind of earlier chapter that really was kind of the DNA of this. But when I was 18, I mentioned, off camera, I grew up in Grand Prairie, Northern Alberta. And so at 18 years old, I just graduated high school, basically my path took me into Bulgaria, into Eastern Europe. Like 1 year post-Soviet kind of regime, new democracy, tons of upheaval. Went there at 18, ended up there for 2 years. And basically went there to help kind of establish English schools and teach. But like super transformative time for me in my life. And one of the most significant things that happened to me at 18 was I landed there with a blue Canadian passport. And I started meeting young people that were my age, and they had these little green Soviet passports. And it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that what I had been given, born into, by no choice of my own, I had a future with that. And they had no future with that little green passport. And that was no choice of theirs either. And so like early on, I would say I kind of had this instilled, like, I've been given some things and I need to do something with that. And I already was kind of leaning, I'm an empath, like, human condition, human suffering, all that stuff. So, that took me, I stayed connected to Eastern Europe. I did a degree in Edmonton in Slavic languages. I have a Russian major. Not too many people have a Russian major. And linguistics minor. So, but a lot of that was, and then that took me back to Eastern Europe a lot, to Yugoslavia, summer months, and I finished my degree in St. Petersburg. And so a lot of that was interacting with people, being exposed to other cultures, and coming from Grand Prairie, like, a small community, kind of like Cochrane, I guess. That was a pretty big eye-opener for me. But that really impacted me, that there are so many different people and different languages. And I was the minority when I went to Bulgaria, which was actually important too, as a Canadian. And just really fell in love with that part of the world. And So that some of those, like serving others, I have something that was given to me. Some things I've acquired, I've learned, but some things I've been given, and I need to do something with that. That's why I think that undercurrent has stayed. And then when our young family, we were moving around a bit and landed in Cochrane almost a decade ago. And when we landed here right away, we felt like, okay, this is our place. This is our home. Started putting down roots here, and then I thought, okay, we're going to be here now. And I just had this drive to start connecting. And that is part of who I am, is I'm a connector. And the more I connected, I was working for a transportation company that was Winnipeg-based at the time. So I was working in our Calgary office, so 2 hours a day back and forth on Stony Trail. And then 1 week out of 4, I was flying to Winnipeg. And so I was gone a lot. But I really wanted to be in my community. But there were no jobs for my continuous improvement, corporate transformation stuff here. And so I had this vision, and I didn't even know what an innovation center was, but I just had this vision that we need an innovation center or something to help create jobs in Cochrane for people like me, so I don't have to drive up the big hill on the 1A to Calgary every day. And I started meeting people, started meeting the mayor, started meeting people at the town, business leaders, other community leaders, and a few of us, we started having this vision in the community for, what would this look like and what are the needs? And the first vision we had got completely rewritten during COVID. And so thankfully, in some ways, we didn't, create a legal entity or had some agenda, because that got blown out of the water during COVID. And then when the dust settled, the town, good on them, the town decided they were going to put shovels in the ground and create an innovation center, because they felt the priority for that. And so when the town took that, a town administration action, then in the community side, we said, okay, we need to put shovels in the ground. We need to do something. We've been talking about this for years. So I basically put my hand up and said, hey, I think this is my vision. We've been talking about this for a while. We need to do something about this. And I know there was some entrepreneurship kind of undertones or themes to what we had kind of preempted with. And I never saw myself. I've always been work for the man. Go to a job and get a salary, stable. But I feel like from a startup lens, this passion, this thing about like we need something here, and I've been being polite. We need to act on this now. And so I just said, I don't know if everybody's with me, but I think we should do this. And people were like, yep, let's do that. So 2 years ago, we created a nonprofit in Cochrane called Innovate Cochrane, registered it with CRA and did all those things. And then because of that, we put like tangible boundaries around it. And then we could start putting things in it. We could start doing things. And so that's where some of our programming and testing, just like any other startup, testing your value, like why do we exist? What value do we bring? Meeting like the Chamber of Commerce or meeting Cochrane Tourism, understanding who else is in our community already, what are they doing? And then how do we complement what they're doing, not duplicate, because I hate duplication. Like from a lean, manufacturing, waste is don't duplicate, bring extra value. And so that's been a lot of what's driven us to where we are today.
Unreal.
Yeah.
There's so much to dive into there, but I'm going to go back a little bit first. That realization that you had in Bulgaria when you were 18 is quite a sophisticated thought. It's not something that would easily come to an 18-year-old.
Mm-hmm. I was pretty contemplative back then. So I was a bit of an oddball. I played football and I played in the orchestra. I played the viola. And my football teammates, they could not get their head around that. So maybe some of my personal DNA, I was a bit quirky.
Definitely.
But I appreciate that. Thank you.
What was there like a realization moment, or was it kind of built over time? Was there something an experience that brought that out in you? Or?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think just building relationship, same like I do here. Learning Bulgarian. That's a Cyrillic alphabet, different than our Latin alphabet. So it was a learning curve. But I found I'm pretty good at languages. And I did French, in high school in Grand Prairie, and really didn't think it had any real world application until I went to Bulgaria and couldn't speak Bulgarian, but I found some high school kids playing soccer that could speak French. So then we had this crazy kind of epiphanal, we can communicate with each other by just using different languages. And so the notion of language for me, it was an osmosis kind of epiphany, but there were moments like that where you're like, wow, I can connect with these people. But on their terms and in a language that we can both speak, whatever that might be. English, that might be French, that might be Bulgarian. And actually, ironically, I would say I did this arts degree. I did a Russian major, and then I thought, there are no jobs for people who get Russian majors. And I never was a traditional path, anything. But now reflecting, some of the best skills I got to do this corporate continuous improvement work was when I was in Russia finishing my degree in St. Petersburg. It was an immersive Russian program, and we had to go to the Russian like state galleries, and our teacher would just send us in there to meet her colleagues that were like the tour guides, and instead of the tour guides translating into English for the guests, like London School of Economics or whatever, she would just speak in Russian, and then we had to translate for these guests. And I remember, like, I was a bit older than some of the other students because I'd done this Eastern European thing, a little bit more maturity or willing to risk whatever. I put my hand up first, and I would do the tour, and then none of the other students wanted to do it. So then I had to do all of it. But I realized translating between human languages, when I got into like these larger corporates where you've got an IT department or a finance or accounting department or an operational department, they're all speaking English, but they are not speaking the same language. And I realized I have translation skills. And it went straight into I took that core skill set and realized I can totally use this. So my resume was always just crap. Like I could never sell myself. I needed to get in front of people, and I knew if I can just get an interview with you, I've got value. I just got to say it in a different way. And that helped me. That helped me get, and then I got validated and we delivered value. And now I can be hired as a director of continuous improvement or innovation because people know that language. But early on, I just knew I had some skills that I have human connection skills, and I learned to speak IT. I learned to speak accounting. I almost did an accounting designation, so I have enough. As a truck driver, like my dad, during my summer months at university. So when I was sitting in the coffee, lounge at the big headquarters, and I could talk to the old drivers because hey, my dad last year at 80 retired from truck driving. So you just got to find a language, right, of bridging, and then once you get that connection and trust, people are willing to come alongside, and if you're trying to bring value to them, like from a change management lens, now you've got the human layer engaged, and now we can do something. Yeah. So
I love the way that you describe that. I think it's fascinating because not only do you actually speak multiple languages, linguistic-wise, but also, being able to translate, like you said, like speaking English, but speaking two different languages. Mm-hmm. How have you found that important throughout your life, obviously in the community and connection side of things, but why have you continued to foster that? Mm-hmm.
I find like the most meaningful work I've done corporate, like in my day job and in the community, is the deeper we get into human connection, the more we can do collectively. And so what I'm really proud about as a community of Cochrane is that not just my little network of people that I've made connections to, but then their connections, and then they introduce me to more people. We have enough connected humans in this community that want to do something meaningful that we can literally now, if we come up with an idea to say, hey, we want to do something in housing, or we want to do something, in bringing more IT, or whatever, IoT, tech companies here, and using Cochrane as a small community, as a test bed for things, we can test things at a community level kind of lab or petri dish, and then prove things in a community this size, and then share that to other communities. That's what I want to do. And so we have tons of great relationships in town. One of and I'll say as far as shout outs go, the Helping Hands agency here in Cochrane, kind of a unique entity. They are like a jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife. They have like 13 different things they do in the community, and they have an army, like hundreds of volunteers and like 3 or 4 staff. But they came into our community innovation ecosystem program where we brought all these community entities together, and they just grabbed onto it, and they took some of our technical training around testing ideas and surfacing ideas, and they saw that during like really hot spells or really cold spells, there weren't very robust services in Cochrane as a community for people that are shelter compromised or fragile or whatever, right? There's better language to that. And so they thought on Friday afternoon, hey, this is a topic we're seeing it in our social channels. They do like food sheds, free food sheds, and so they have a good network. So they decided to do an experiment. By Tuesday, they had connected to the library, who's another one of our collaborators. They created some space, and they just put it out to socials and to the local newspapers. Hey, we're just gonna have a community conversation about this topic about like shelter for these like adverse weather events. And like I got there 5 minutes before the meeting started, and I got the last seat. That room was jammed with anybody in our community that had an interest or passion in shelter, keeping people safe. And there was a lot of different agendas and ideas and things, but they stood up at the front, all 3 of them. I was so proud of them. It chokes me up a bit, but they were just standing up there and they said, we want to do this. Who's with us, basically? And now they have them. Like, so they actually have businesses and other entities that said, we don't have like human resources, we can't shelter people, but we can bring people into our space. And then Helping Hands came and said, well, we can bring like the physical elements or volunteers or training, if there's, like safety related training, like they brought their pieces, and then that business or that entity said, hey, we can keep our doors open longer if we need to. You just bring all of those unique contributions, but you just need a lightning rod. You just need one person to say, hey, we should do this. We should do this. My offering is I'm making space for the conversation, and then all these other people come together. Like, that is effing fantastic, and it happens here. Yeah, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, you should be. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You talk about connecting all these pieces, and so I noticed when I was going through your website that there's a lot of puzzle analogies or puzzle photos.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Canva. It's fantastic. Before I'm a bit like back to the startup thing. Like, we needed some basic graphics, and I was kind of doing a bunch of stuff before. Like, we have some board members now. Sam Nickerson, she's fantastic. She probably rolls her eyes at me, but some of the initial stuff that I used for some of our presentations, like we're pitching before we were an entity, we had some graphic and copy that we had made to sell this vision. And so we just repurposed some of it, and graciously she just took what I had used initially just to get us a website and get us stood up. But so it's Canva, but the spirit of it is like I think in pictures, and then I often will speak in pictures, and the picture of a puzzle, especially like complicated puzzles that no piece is the same, that resonates with me. I mean, even the ones that none of the shapes are the same, that's even better. Because for me, that's what this is. It's being that lightning rod, and each person, like when we have a gathering in here, in Spotlight Innovators, and people just show up, they're walking in with their unique puzzle piece. And I might not have ever met them. Literally 50% of the people that walk into those, they've either never been in this facility or they've never been to one of our events. That's fantastic. And then we connect those puzzle pieces. So that's an easy touch point for people to kind of resonate with. Oh, that's what this is about. I'm my own unique puzzle piece, but I'm not a puzzle, I'm just a piece. So I'm my own whole, but I'm also part of something greater, but only if I put my puzzle piece on the table. So you can get lots of mileage out of that picture. That's why I like it, but yeah.
As an attendee, so you have these conversations here. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the commonality among those people who come to sit in the audience?
That's a good question. I think typically they are people who want community, and lots of them are new faces. There's lots of historic people that are also part of our networks here, but there's more new people than there are people that were born near Cochrane. But a lot of them, they want community. They are change agents already. They're already doing things, and then a topic will resonate with them. They'll see on socials, and then they'll come out. And so our very first pilot here, which was a giant experiment. So Reed Kimmett, from 2 Pharmacy here in town, like fantastic business. They are like deeply about social impact. So they're called 2 Pharmacy, which is health for you, health for another. It's literally in their DNA. So every purchase you make there, 1% of that goes to an entity in our community that then actually uses that to then carry that value on to somebody else. And so I said, Reed, you guys are doing like crazy innovative things. And he was like, well, and I was like, no, you seriously are doing crazy innovative things. I think the community would benefit by just hearing kind of the behind the scenes, like, who are you and what are you doing? How does that happen? Because it's intentional. And so I pulled him up on stage, and we set up some cameras with the high school video program, which was awesome. And he came out with just such profound things. And then his last comment was, I was so surprised that anybody would come. I was like, okay, we're onto something, because it's somebody like Reed who doesn't want a microphone, who needs a microphone. And so I was super happy that that was part of our vessel. We could make space for that, and then we could schedule it. And then Julia would make space here. And so everybody brings their piece, and then just the mastery of it, the orchestration of it was, yeah. I mean, the symphony orchestra I played in Grand Prairie was really high caliber, but everybody played their piece. But it's not all solos. And football, you for sure can't win a game if you all look like me. You need guys that are twice my size, but you also need me. And so throughout all of those pieces, they all flow together to human connection and bring your unique value. Yeah, we're testing that all day long around here, it feels like. So,
what do you think? What do you think it means to be a connector? Is it, and I'm thinking out loud here, but is it seeing these connections that others might not see, or realizing that there is a gap in communication, or what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
So I've never had a lot of money, currency. I could use more, and I'm learning. We'll get there. But of late, I realized that, and I used to look down on myself for that, like, you know, I didn't come from money and that kind of thing. But I realized recently that there's social and relational currency. Like trust is currency for me, like big currency, like deposits, like change management. I need trust bank accounts with people, and we need to be putting deposits in there. So I started to see that layer as like a legitimate exchange of currency. And I have a lot of social currency because I've been building that, and I get lots of ROI from that, and I get a lot of benefit from it because I'm generous. So if I think through the lens of a currency, connection and connecting, being a connector is being willing to, you know, we can donate time, we can donate money, but we can also give of our network. So when I have people up on the stage, half the time, my general rule of thumb is, because there's a lot going on. I got a day job and a family and this stuff, which I love. And so my rule of thumb is, if somebody's name comes to me from 3 different people, like, oh, you got to meet so-and-so, as soon as I get to 3, I'm like, okay, I got to book a coffee with them. And sometimes I'll have coffee here with them. I'm like, man, would you be willing to do this? And they're like, yep. So for me, that's sharing. That's generosity of sharing our network with somebody else. And you're borrowing your trust to me. So when you email someone and say, hey, you absolutely have to meet Nathan, they don't know who I am. But they trust that you do, and so then they're willing to give me their time. So it's all of these exchanges of currency, and there's value in that. So for me, it's fundamental, is people being willing to, if nobody said, hey, you should meet so-and-so, and then they don't send an email and say, hey, you should meet Nathan, that's a cold call. I mean, those are hard to come by these days. So it's been hugely valuable for me. Because people are willing to share their networks with us.
I love the way that you put that, especially in the social currency kind of light. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that social currency is becoming more widely accepted? Isn't necessarily the right way of putting it, but like valuable externally to those who maybe, you know, traditionally valued money? Mm-hmm.
I think from even in a corporate environment, when I see that you can have a capital budget for, we're going to buy these IT systems, and then this IT team is going to implement them, and then the humans won't use them, that's a massive financial risk that did not pay off. And it didn't pay off because there's a social currency that you didn't have a bank account for that. You had a bank account at the company for IT spend, but you didn't have a bank account for social currency. And you need both of those bank accounts from a change management, you know, leading change, transforming culture, systems. Those currencies are equal in value and impact, if not maybe even the other way around. You know, so even in my professional journey, you'll hear digital transformation roadmap a lot, and it's real. Like there's a lot of, you have to have an intentional plan. How are you going to evolve? How does automation, how does robotic process automation, how does AI, how do those things fit into your digital roadmap? But if you're going to transform your business between today and 5 years from now, when you get to 5 years from now, you're going to need the humans in your organization to also have been transformed and evolve, because they will be facing a whole different reality. And so how intentional are we with the human transformation roadmap that needs to be directly adjacent to the digital transformation roadmap? And so I think that human layer, like in any industry, is more and more is becoming the differentiator, because automation is not a silver bullet, because they're still humans. If you could remove all the humans from the businesses, like even in a church, you know, growing up, I was like, man, if we could just get the humans out of the church, this place would be fantastic. But we're messy, and learning how to work with the humans can be the differentiator, I think, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm curious to explore that a little bit further. There's research and things that show currently that our current workforce and our upcoming workforce is different. I mean that's evident, right? But I think there's some apathy coming out. There's some things like people just kind of a little bit of expectation and that sort of thing. But then on the flip side, you also hear exactly what you're describing, that people are the change, and that there's increasing value in not only recognizing that but fostering that. What do you think is needed to kind of universalize that thought and ensure that as a society we're moving forward in the right direction?
I think, we talk about speaking different languages. For sure, generations speak different languages. Within a corporate context, you don't always get to choose who your teammates are, and there's lots of different perspectives and things. And I think I've had the privilege recently of spending some time with university students that are doing projects with us corporately, and that's not a demographic that I've spent a lot of time with, and so it's been curious and challenging for me to engage them. I've hired people out of university and things before, but I think the opportunity. I think one of the oils that will grease that engine of how do we function in the diversity that lives within our four walls called Trimac Transportation, where I'm currently employed, is finding ways to connect with each person where they're at. I mean, being very candid to say, hey, as a company, we need to achieve this. And our team is this puzzle piece, and you're this puzzle piece within our team. Like we're all a whole, I'm a whole, and you're a whole. But we're also part together of something greater, and then that is whole, but then that's also part of something greater. And so when you can start to see through that lens, then I can say to you, hey, if you're on my team, and this has been my leadership style. I'm as your manager, I'm responsible for us to deliver this objective. But in order for us to do that, there's 5 of you on our team. I'm going to spend time with each of you and figure out how are you unique and what drives you versus John or Mary. And then I'm going to do my best, and you'll see my intention that I'm genuinely trying to find which piece of that objective is going to be most meaningful for you. It's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies, but how can I make the work itself as meaningful and rewarding to you as possible? And also then speaking your language of validation. Wow, that was awesome. Or hey, I see your effort on that. Can I come alongside you and actually let's raise our bar together on that, because I'm investing in you. So I've always done pretty well at meeting objectives that are corporate, because I am fundamentally about my people first, and they know that, but they also know that collectively we need to deliver this. And when they know that I care about them first, they are very willing to go the extra mile. And so when companies are like, how do we get discretionary effort out of our people? That makes me feel a bit slimy sometimes, depending on the context. But for me, discretionary effort means I'm vested in you first. And then collectively, when people are actually willing to lean in, and you can kind of counter that apathy, or I don't know what this company's about, they're just trying to get more from me, that people do withdraw from that. And so it is in that culture layer. That's where this stuff, you start to see the fruit of that come out in productivity, people taking extra days off, or giving 80% when they, could be giving 100. People that give 120%, when they need to. Again, that's all nuanced to each company or organization, but it's how you lead is where you'll see the bridging of the differences and making space for, I just joined the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It's actually belonging is on ours at Trimac, which I appreciate. And there's lots of nuance and conversation around that as a formal entity in any organization. But for me, it's valuable, because what we're doing at Trimac, I find, is within our own kind of council, practicing how do we make space for our uniqueness, and then how do we lead that, not communicate it or tell that, but lead that, demonstrate it. It has to be genuine. I mean, young people like my kids, my 3 daughters, 13, 15, 17, their bullshit meter is really strong. And if I'm like, you need to do this, or if I fly off the handle and they're like, Dad, that was a disproportionate response, I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I need to be human. I need to be real. But I can, when I have that footing, I can be honest with you and say, hey, this did not go the way we wanted. We have to get this done. I'm in this with you guys. Like, how can we get this done? Typically, team. When the team knows that we're a we, and it's not just me trying to get you to do something, I've not typically had many roadblocks on that stuff. Yeah.
I love that. I think the belonging piece is so important, and ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing like purpose, right? Whether it be individual purpose, on one hand, but also team purpose and organization purpose and everything in between. That's what belonging is. It's a commonality of, I believe this, you believe this, let's achieve this together.
Yeah, yeah, and still honor our uniqueness, and we're not sacrificing that piece. So it's both and for me on that side. Yeah, yeah.
You speak to entrepreneurs day in, day out. I'm curious, what, if any, commonality do you find in what's missing? Like what are these people? What do these people need more of in order to achieve what they want to achieve?
That's a fantastic question. I'm pretty proud as an ecosystem here in Cochrane over the last few years. With our community level work that we're doing and others are doing, and then what the town of Cochrane is also bringing to the table. We do have a Cochrane Business Incubator, so for businesses that are trying to start something up. There's another Smart Start program, which kind of helps, again, gestate and get some footing underneath them. So there's that technical skills, or, founders, entrepreneurs will have an idea and it'll come out of their experience, their journey. They have a value that they feel like they can bring and they can exchange for money. I think for me, some of what I feel like we could, do extra maybe work to shore up is more around, you're a founder, you bring strength to the table, and maybe your strength isn't how do I legalize an entity, or how do I buy the right insurance, or how do I protect my IP. There are, in our ecosystem, both here in Cochrane and the greater Calgary ecosystem, which is awesome, there are services for those things. And so those things are available. You need to just make connections to make sure people have access to it. I think for me then the next layer would be more around, as a founder, sometimes our blind spots it's back to that human layer. So you feel like you've got the next greatest fill in the blank. Are you willing to test that against others and actually take feedback on that thing? Or does your ego say, actually, no, I'm not sitting in the passenger seat. I'm driving on this and I'm driving us off the cliff, whether we want to go there or not. So the risk often for me is less in are people getting training on the mechanics, which they need, because that can also be a risk point. For me, it's typically more, it's us individually cultivating our inner space, our inner garden, because that's where the weeds typically are. But then in order for you to even be willing to see those things, are you in a safe environment where people are modeling that back to you, say, oh man, like I screwed up. Like that was terrible. I made a terrible, like even in corporate, like I want to show people that was a terrible idea. Thanks for your feedback. I'm totally not thinking, correctly on that. We have to practice making space for people to feel safe to put their idea on the table. And we'll often, we have a founders coffee thing that one of our board members has set up here, and we often encourage founders to put their idea on the table. For sure there's reason why people are, I don't want to share this because I don't have a foundation in it yet. Somebody might take my idea. That's risky, but I think more oftentimes we often find that if somebody's willing to put their idea on the table, that table of 8 or 12 people at the coffee shop are willing to say, hey, like I've seen this, or this worked for me, or have you thought about that, or I should connect you to so-and-so because they've done that before. You end up typically with more return when you're willing to share, and so we try and practice that. And so I think that toolkit is, we need to cultivate more of that. But again, that happens within a community of some sort. It's building that community layer for that.
Yeah. 100% agreed on the feedback thing. 100%, yeah. You see it on both sides though, right? So it's from a giving perspective, there's a certain finesse that you can go about, to ensure that it's received in a good way. But also on a receiving end, you need to be open to it, as you mentioned. Are there any tactics that you've seen that help facilitate that process in a conducive, in a successful way?
Yeah, I think having some who are maybe further down the path than them, like we have some fantastic mentors, successful people that have exited businesses, and they're in our community, they want to give back, they come to some of our events and they're willing to mentor. And that is a fantastic vehicle to say, hey, I totally empathize with what you're doing right now. This worked for me, or, this is where I completely, failed. And because people often will only see those who've exited, and they won't see, the ones that maybe their first 3 ventures were a complete flop and they are almost in bankruptcy and now they've got this 4th one. That story doesn't often come out. And so it's good for people to see the humanity behind somebody's journey, to validate their own struggles. For me, you know, empathy of, hey, I've totally been there, I totally get what you're going through. Like, that's totally normal, what you're experiencing. We could probably use to hear that more often. Probably all of us, frankly. Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That vulnerability aspect, I think that's something that's coming up increasingly on through, you know, day-to-day conversation, but also thought leadership content, that sort of thing as well, which we'll get into. But obviously you think it's a good thing. You know, traditionally everybody only kind of showed their successes and their wins and that sort of thing, which made it very complicated or difficult as a, you know, maybe somebody who's not as experienced to look up to that and be like, oh, you know, these people don't experience these losses.
Mm-hmm. And therefore I'm not going to share my weaknesses with them because they obviously don't have any. That's a miss for us as a society, I would say.
Yeah. So what is the importance in sharing, like dive a little bit deeper there,
Yeah.
What is the importance of sharing vulnerability and you know, the fact that it's not all sunshine and rainbows?
Well, I think, and for me, the reality is, unless you're like 1% of 1%, it isn't all you know, rainbows and butterflies. So why not just be real? Like for me, that's the best possible path I can take. You know, it's not to overshare or, you know, to do it still respecting your own boundaries and others' boundaries. But when I am human and demonstrate that I'm human, it validates to you that you are also human. And there's no exit ramp, there's no off ramp for that I've experienced yet. So I find the best path forward is for us to just be okay to be ourselves and learn. Like, we do need to learn, and if we don't, then we'll probably go around the same mountain again. I've been around some mountains lots of times. And yeah, but being able to invite people into your life, you don't need 30 people, maybe you just need one or two. But finding those networks where you can build your muscles. Like growing up, my mom and dad gave me lots of great stuff, and there's some things that I didn't learn, like that willingness to challenge, or that willingness to raise my voice when it needs to be raised. And so I need people now that will help me change my narrative from before. That some parts of me are saying, don't even touch that, when I need to go there, because there's some things I need to wade through and work through for me to get victory or get another layer of footing. I need humans that are going to help me navigate a different narrative. And it's people that help us do that. Yeah.
In your organization's name is Cochrane. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're focused on doing your work here.
Yeah.
Do you think location plays a role in community in general and how it's perceived and how it's fostered?
Yeah, it's such a nuanced thing, because I in my corporate space, continuous improvement is get to a standard process and then get everybody to follow the same process. When it comes to community innovation, just like we've said, every puzzle, we will build a community of Cochrane puzzle. It's going to look completely different than Strathmore or Airdrie or Chestermere. And so for me, the nuance that we're kind of testing now is there something, I said I'd be super proud if we did something in Cochrane and let's export that to somewhere else. That's my ego saying, look what Cochrane's doing. The reality is, how much of what we're doing in Cochrane can be directly imported somewhere else. You, in some ways, don't want that. You want the cool people in Airdrie to rise up together, and when they connect themselves, they're going to get a completely different emergent outcome than what we did. So for me, I think the challenge in front of us here is, what are we doing, and maybe what are the principles, or what are the essences of what we're doing? Can we share any of that value out to Okotoks or wherever else? And like founders that have, other founders that have exited, there is some layer of shared experience and wisdom that you can glean from others. That's the spirit of, I think, what we want to do. So we're still testing, frankly. Every community our size, roughly in Alberta, has a town administration. They have a library. They have, a medical facility, or they have a police, station. Like, what are the elements that are the corners of the puzzle in every community? How do we maybe just show, maybe not who you need in your community? You don't need an Innovate fill in the blank everywhere, but who's doing those things? Who's that catalyst? You might not need our entity, but you need a catalyst who has the ability to make connections. So it's less the who and it's more the what. I think we're distilling down to the what level. And is there insight there that we could maybe share and help others just get out of the gates maybe a little bit faster?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a world in which you do what you're doing here elsewhere in the future?
I think so. Yeah, maybe Bulgaria. I can't get Bulgaria out of my DNA. It's still a part of who I am, and Yeah, we're shooting to even take our girls there, at some point and my daughter Sofia, our oldest daughter, is named after the capital of Bulgaria. So I've found ways. It's just part of our DNA. I still am loosely fluent. It takes me a couple days, and I'm back into it when I'm there. So, I don't know. We'll see. I still have that travel, from when I was 18. That never left me for sure. So I'm sure my kids will want to do that stuff too. But yeah, what we're doing here. Some of the work, for example, that we're doing with Unbounded Thinking, they are an Alberta-wide entity, and they do have a vision for taking their value, their piece, and sharing it more broadly. And so we're in talks with them about, well, what we've done here is pretty cool. How can Innovate Cochrane, help take that content and be a conduit or an advocate or a council of some sort to share that? We'll find our puzzle piece in that story, but I think there is one. I just don't know what that puzzle piece looks like yet. Yeah.
What is the pursuit of human capacity?
I firmly believe that we need less of people pursuing more and more focus on releasing what each of us already has. I find we are more blocked in the gold that's already in us than we are absent of gold. I think, that's really been striking me, that there is so much even in myself that, back to narratives and beliefs and limiting beliefs, like when I get a glimpse of who I am and when I stand in that, it's powerful and it comes out. When I don't, when I'm silent or I'm nervous or that gold doesn't come out. And so for me, my vision is how can I, and again, this maybe isn't Innovate Cochrane board chair, innovate more of me personally and my own kind of leadership path. And what's the insight that I've been distilling personally? I feel like it really is around what can I do to help people get unblocked and validated and affirmed and confident in their own voice, which is unique, and helping make space for them to practice using that voice and build those muscles, because the more you use your unique voice, the more the world benefits from what's inside of you. So for me, it's so much of it is, how do I just unblock myself? How do I get others to help me with that? How do I become a conduit? Because the more that flows through me purely and isn't full of, filter and crap and stuff, the better the world around me will be. So that is kind of my personal mission. Is corporate land, it's about the humans. Community innovation, it's about the humans. But about the humans means it starts with me. So like personal innovation, and then my first network, and then that just keeps cascading outward. But if it doesn't start with me, my cup's empty. I got nothing to share. So personal accountability, personal growth is the natural spring. And then we just watch what happens when that just spills over into my relationships on my team or at work or here, meeting new people. It can be digital. My LinkedIn network is awesome. Like I've met you guys online, and then we get to have a chance to meet in person. That's happened countless times to me now. So-and-so, hey, meet so-and-so. I love what they're doing. I see their content, and then we get a chance to have a coffee. That's really rich at that point. So there's lots of ways to go about it, but it's about personal growth, and then you benefit. If I haven't done the work that I've done, you and I aren't having this conversation. So there is some implication of that, I think, too.
What are some of those blockages that they need to be considered or pushed through, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, if you have a life partner, they're often a great mirror to help kind of shine a light on what's not going well for me personally. If I'm willing to let that reflect back to me and say, why did that blow up like that? What was my part in that? If I'm not willing to ask that question, probably nothing's going to change. I think for me, as an example, some of my upbringing was around being quiet, like not raising my voice, not drawing attention to myself. I was a hyper shy, like just terrifyingly shy human through grade school. And then I had to practice using my voice, and now that's not as much of a problem. But just belief systems, things that when we're young and we're in an environment where we need those adults to keep us alive, we will morph and do things and take on belief systems to survive. And then those parts of us stay locked in those belief systems because they helped us get through something. But then we carry those same beliefs into the next chapter when we can stand on our own and we can serve ourselves and protect ourselves and keep ourselves alive, but we those parts of us, they still have the microphone. And so I think finding ways to kind of intentionally surface what are those voices when I get a glimpse of something or I'm passionate about something, and then all of a sudden there's a voice inside me that says, oh yeah, that's too risky. Well, curiosity now in me says, I wonder why I think that's too curious. I wonder why. Versus, oh yeah, I'm not doing what I should be, and shame and like people like Brene Brown, like just soaking in people that have really studied some of these layers of ourselves. There's tons of insight if we're willing to just open ourselves up to new fresh water to flow in, and then fresh water naturally pushes stagnant water out. So it's some of those practices I've found really helpful, but it starts with willingness, and it's scary. It's scary when the things that got you here are now kind of helping crumble your foundation. It's hard to look at those things and actually let go of some things, maybe even that have been a part of you for a while. There's some grieving. Even when you're letting go of things that are undoing you, you're still grieving the loss of it because they've been on your journey with you. But unless you're willing to let go of some of those things, like if my cup is full of contaminated water, I need to empty that out before I can pour fresh water in. And that's a perpetual micro decision kind of daily routine. It's not one and done. That's a cadence, that's a rhythm.
Are there individuals, as in thought leaders, or books or blogs or podcasts or anything like that? Where do you consume in order to keep your mind fresh and keep coming up with your own ideas and your own spins on things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's still some really impactful ones early on when I first started, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, and I kind of hit the wall and realized I need to do something internal or I'm going to lose the most important things in my life. That was a pretty pivotal time in my personal journey. And so from an inner reflection spaces, guys like Michael Singer or others, there's a global platform called Sounds True. And they have fantastic global thought leaders, practitioners that really, there's some really kind of time tested from all parts of the globe practices that you can get into that really do help you slow down and be present with yourself. Sometimes it's hard for us to sit with ourselves. That's why we have music and stimulation going on. So there's micro practices that I found from some of those types of folks that help me make space then to hear and then process kind of what was lower than that. To be honest, even tapping into some counseling, people that are masterfully and professionally trained to help you, surface the things that are causing you friction. Often they're buried and we can't see them ourselves. So seeking professional help. For me, initially, I balked at it. My ego was like, nope, that's for people that are broken. Well, that's me. So that's been hugely beneficial, even group therapy type, interpersonal circles. You got to be humble. And you got to realize that you're not all together. But when you invite those things in, or when you open yourself up to those things, those have been some of the deepest human connection moments, I would say, is in some of those types. Putting myself in the path of that has been hugely impactful. And guys start with why, what's your personal purpose? Simon Sinek is a good place. He's got lots of good stuff. Ozan Varol, he has a genius book. I listened to it twice recently. Release Your Genius or Awaken Your Genius or something. Super valuable book. I'm an Audible guy, so I consume things there. So there's, again, kind of depends on where you're at on your journey or what themes are most kind of resonant for you at that time. But I think even if you're a LinkedIn person or some of those platforms, if you just key in, the beauty of the web now is I'm struggling with this, or this happened to me, or you can even start with some of those cues, and you'll probably end up surfacing people's chats and threads you can tap into. Yeah.
You mentioned there was a wall that you hit 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable sharing what that looked like, and is that what led you down this path?
Yeah, parts of me were already kind of unlocked, and I was pursuing, I knew some of my gifts, I'm a connector, I can translate, the things I've talked about. So at certain levels, professionally, things all looked pretty good together, and I was, being promoted and bringing value. But on my personal side, my relationship with my wife was eroding, and subtly and not so subtly. And for me, part of it was I could get to a certain level of depth, intimacy, or being willing to be vulnerable or to show myself to her emotionally. And so outwardly, this level of conversation, this is easy. But, behind closed doors, I could tell that we would hit the wall on things, and she would just feel this vacancy from me emotionally. And we'd go around that mountain, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but something is holding me back. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on that. And then 6 weeks later or 3 months later, we'd be right back to the same conversation. And frankly, eventually she said, like, we can't keep doing this. And we'd had that actual conversation too, many times. And we're 21 years this year, but call it 5 or 6 years ago, we came to a point where she wasn't even yelling. She was just like, I can't keep doing, I can't do this. I can't keep doing this. And that, for whatever reason, in that moment, that really, it was like, okay, I am legitimately going to lose my girls, lose my most important relationship. I don't know what it is. It just feels like this dark abyss that whenever I kind of turn towards it and try and start dabbling into it, there was literally a part of me, a voice in my head that would say, you're literally going to die if you try and touch that. So don't touch it. And so I wouldn't. And then I'd get this carnage. But that time I felt like I'm going to lose everything anyway. I just need to figure this out, and I got to be willing. I just have to be willing. I didn't even know where to start. I just had to be willing to do something. And then honestly, when I kind of put that out to the universe, I took that posture, internal posture. I'd kind of let myself go physically. I wasn't doing any exercise, and all I knew to do at that point was, I know physically that's something I know I need to do. I'm just going to start with that. And then I started going to the gym in our office, and I would just walk on. Couldn't even run. I would just walk on the treadmill for 15 minutes, and then that became 20, and then that became 30, and then I could jog, and then eventually I could run. But I coupled it with audio, and again, I didn't even know where to start. But then we happened to be out for dinner with this friend's couple of ours, and she was like, "Oh, I'm doing this master's, and this guy is amazing." It was this Michael Singer guy in his book at that time. So I just plugged it in, and some of it was pretty deep, and some of it was more kind of narrative story. And then I just started cycling through different sources. And then I picked up on my physical, but I was putting that fresh water in. And then it started to unlock, okay, like, I don't actually like myself. I don't feel like I'm actually lovable. Why would people told me that growing up? I actually don't believe that about myself. That was below the surface. But when I surfaced that, then I could start, and shame was a huge thing. Like for most of my youth and then into my adult life, I was addicted to pornography. And it was this, but I didn't know the word addiction, because in my community growing up, we didn't use that word. It was like, just don't do that behavior, and that's sin, or you got to stop that. And I just could not figure out how to do that, because there was a layer to me that I wasn't unpacking yet. And so that caused all kinds of strife for years. And there was a huge shame thing underneath it. And it just would cause this cycle, and I was just stuck in it. I couldn't get out. And that partly was some of the behavior that was impacting, although the thing that was really unraveling our marriage was below that, and I could tell it was below that. Because I was just using pornography just to escape whatever this discomfort was. And it was pretty effective, except it was destroying me. So when I made that decision, shortly after I was on the treadmill and listening to audiobooks, it struck me that I needed to actually go. The word addiction came to me, and I felt like that's what this is. I just need to be honest with myself that I'm completely dependent. I cannot get out of this. I cannot choose no. And so I went to Alberta Health Services, and I did an intake with a sexual addictions therapist, which I didn't even know existed. And then that unlocked like a massive amount of just insight and empathy and tools and practices. I mean, I still had to be willing to apply myself, which I was, but then these things were coming to me to help me navigate that. And then my therapist, she said, okay, you're on this path. I really think you would benefit from an addictions recovery circle. And so my general posture at that point was, okay, whatever comes, okay. Whatever comes, okay. So I joined this addictions recovery circle, and all the guys in that circle were there because of this theme and some behavior, but it was sexual addiction. But almost to a person, all of them had multiple other, whether alcohol or drug dependencies. And for the most part, they've been able to pass through all of those recovery cycles, but this was their one that was the most kind of tenacious, which in some ways I was like, okay, that's encouraging to me, because that's just all I'd really known. But that, like, I grew up in church circles and sitting in circles of people. That addictions recovery circle was probably the most sacred thing I've ever experienced. Actually, it was super powerful. I think that's where I started to see the power of like others intentionally making space for you to try on new beliefs, to speak new language, and learn new narratives. but also be encouraged by everybody else fighting. Like there was nobody in there that thought they had it all together. We all knew that we were upside down. And it was that collective posture that allowed for such like really profound connection. And COVID, kind of ended that chapter, but I'm back into like a group therapy kind of environment. And it's because I know the value of it. It's uncomfortable, but so is when you go to the gym and you lift 10 more pounds this week than you did last week and you have micro muscle tears. You're doing that to build muscle. Well, discomfort isn't bad. Discomfort typically is growth. And so I make a habit now of, do I have any discomfort in my life? Not the, I'm screwing things up with my wife. That's also uncomfortable. I need to keep on that. But where am I putting myself in the path of discomfort? Because that's the growth path typically for me.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
It sounds like, I mean, I'm sure there's countless things that helped you in that time, but it sounds like some of it was kind of, taking initiative yourself to get out of that space and consuming different methods of thought and that sort of thing, but also as a theme of our conversation, the human connection. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is nobody knows what anybody else is going through or, what their closet looks like.
That's it.
What can the average person every day, what can you and I do to support other people when we don't know what, how can we be more open to others?
Be honest. Be honest and have courage. I was reflecting on this the other day. I thought, what's my best contribution, even at work, to our culture, to what I'm doing? I bring knowledge and experience and skills and things. I wrote a post on this the other day because it really struck me. I bring those things that I need to, but they're not the most important thing I can bring. I really believe that the most important thing I can bring is courage. Because when I demonstrate courage, it gives permission to the people around me to have courage. So if somebody's struggling with, they're having a down day or a down week or a down year, mental health wise, if I share with them, man, I had people keep asking me, how was our vacation? We went on a little vacation to BC. It actually wasn't that restful, but I feel bad saying that because I took time away and we invested and we went. It was fun, there's memories, but I came back exhausted. My wife came back exhausted. We're kind of laughing about it. But when I'm honest about that, people are like, oh my God, yeah, I went and had time with my in-laws and, not like my in-laws are bad, but it's just it wasn't restful for us, that particular chapter. But when I'm willing, those aren't sharing my whole closet, sometimes I do. But I intentionally do that with people to say, hey, you know what? People, hey, how's it going today? It's actually going pretty good. But I pause and I use that as a habit marker to say, when somebody asks me, probably just societal, niceties, I'm going to take that as a pause, an invitation for me to pause and say, actually, today's challenging. I didn't sleep well last night, but I'm here and we're leaning into the day and we'll make the best of it. I give permission to other people to say, oh yeah, things aren't going that great. And again, you want to moderate, you want to be mindful of what's maybe appropriate or what can they consume. You don't want to bowl people over. But I find we often don't get that far. We typically don't share much at all. And I find that human fabric layer could use more maintenance for sure. But it takes courage, but not hours of it, often 3 seconds, just to say something. And then the train's out of the station. Then it's interesting to see what happens, but you got to open your mouth. And me first. I think that's a me first thing. That's not when somebody else shows vulnerability, then I'm going to step up. That's not how the recipe works, I would say. So
being intentional with the questions that we're asking and fostering that response and being open to actually receiving that as well.
Yeah. If you say, hey, how's it going? How was your weekend? If I take the time to tell you, do you actually want to hear that? Or was that just hey, our agenda, we got 55 minutes and I got 45 minutes of agenda? Check yourself first. Again, bullshit meters, we all have one. I care about you meters, we all have one of those too. And I think we have this fear of we're not going to get everything done, where if we can let go of that fear and say, if you and I spend time and connect, typically we will get more done and meaningfully for both of us than what maybe that fear was driving us initially to try and accomplish. So I typically lean down the path of human connection first. Back to your question about what's human capacity, human connection. For me, literally it's all about that. And all the other layers follow. Yeah.
What does success look like to you?
I think for me, success is living as close to my center in every moment. Because if I can do that, then I'm the closest thing to the middle of my path and my best contribution and the gold that's in me, maximizing as much of that coming out of me or even just flowing through me. Like my best shot at the most impact I can have in this world, whether my kids or my wife or these conversations, is being as centered as I can be and having the courage to keep leaning more deeper and deeper into that. Like there's some things like I know there's insights that I've been percolating on, and I feel some promptings now to say, hey, you need to actually put that out there. People will benefit from that. It's not an ego thing. You have more in your cup now that you need to share, and it's actually terrifying for me. Like to do videos on social, I'm terrified to do that stuff. And so I've been doing things intentionally. Like this is I appreciate the invitation because there's some beliefs in there that maybe kept me safe before, but they're not helping me now. And I'm grateful for them for what they helped me with before, but now we need to start putting them not in the executive chair. They need to sit over here, and I need to keep moving forward. So I have a growth edge still on lots of things. But if I need to keep leaning into that. That's the best possible value I can offer to anybody else, is by me leaning, not focusing on myself alone, but focusing on myself. Yeah.
Please do follow that journey.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
I look forward to following that along.
Yeah.
What's next for you? I know we've talked about, some plans for
Yeah, great questions, Aiden. This is fantastic. So what's next? I feel like we will kind of overcome the inertia of launching an organization, and I'm super grateful. We have an amazing board. We just now this week approved hiring our executive director, and she's amazing. So I think Innovate Cochrane that's still my passion. Community innovation is still my passion. I'll be part of that. But for me personally, I feel like all the different paths and chapters, they all do feel intentional, and I'm really into that human layer piece. And so during COVID, I did a program called the Inner MBA. It was like a global cohort. And it was a combination of like academics from Harvard and other places, kind of neuroscience and those types of practices. And then these inner practice kind of global thought leaders, they were part of the faculty. And then corporate like C-suite folks that had brought those things into their organizations and had seen benefit. That was the faculty for this global program. It was like a 9-month thing. It was absolutely fantastic. Recently, they've coupled that with a Europe-based university to do a full master's now by doing a thesis attached to the initial study. So I'm looking at, and I'm going to say this now to capture it here because it's on the edge. I'm looking to start my master's in transformative business leadership. And so how do we legitimately transform, not just kind of command and control, but what's my version of effective leadership? And I'm finding resonance in this language that's being spoken by more and more people. And I have some professional footing in it already, coupled with my own personal, I've invested a lot in counseling. I'm not a counselor, but I have some experience and insight in the human fabric. I'm going to now add this thesis to really delve into what's my thesis topic. And it really does revolve around, if I focus on my cup and I unlock my own value, that spills over into my teams, and then that spills over into the company or the community or our society. There's a model inside of me that's really taking shape, and I think I need to put myself in that vehicle to really be accountable to flush that out further. So it's a master's now, I think, that I'll embark on. I'm going to register for it this fall, and then just step onto that path, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where can we send people to follow along?
So right now, Innovate Cochrane, from a collective piece here. For me personally, LinkedIn is kind of where I drop most of my sound bites, my thoughts, musings. But I'll probably fire up my nathanklassen.com website again. It's Sleeping right now.
I noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. I appreciate that feedback. So I would say one other, I did a 10 episode podcast. It's on Spotify or et cetera. And it was, my name will be on it, but I called it Bus Tickets because I bought a bus ticket into Kosovo one time as one of those early promptings. That's my value, Canadian passport, all that. So I went into a militarized zone for 3 days and delivered my own little humanitarian suitcase to this family. So there's a 10 episode Bus Tickets podcast that I did as an experiment. It's also kind of dormant. Some of the references to community of practice, none of that stuff's active right now. So maybe watch for a website in the future. But for now, LinkedIn really is my community. Where I drop content, and then Innovate Cochrane, our website. We have Facebook and LinkedIn and things, but those are the digital footprints. Or watch for in-person events, which we're doing out here. And we'll often have people will just come out for the evening, grab dinner or grab ice cream at McKay's, and then they'll jump in here for a conversation. Like, everybody's welcome. You don't have to show me your driver's license has a Cochrane address on it to come through the door. There's none of that filtering.
Awesome. That's good to know. I will. I personally look forward to visiting.
Yeah.
So.
Look, and we're going to fire. We were kind of sleeping over the summer for these innovation series, but I think we've got some pretty awesome humans in the community we're going to queue up for the fall. So those will all show up on our social channels and stuff too. Mm-hmm.
Nathan, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for sharing vulnerability and your insights and your journey. And there's so much value that people can derive from it, and just grateful for your time.
Thanks, Aiden. This has been really rich. It's been awesome to have some time with you guys today.